Hey everyone, and there I am. We had a little bit of a blip there, but you know what? We don't let that stop us. I am so excited. And by the way, welcome back to Stories That Inspire Us, the author series. I'm here today with of course, an amazing guest. My name is Janice Malillo, your host. And today's guest, his name is John Sovec. He is a nationally recognized expert on creating affirmative support for LGBTQ teens and their families during the coming out process. He is also author of the book Out, and we are going to be chatting today, of course, about his book. And I am so excited to welcome you, John. Welcome to the Stories Podcast.
Thank you. And I'm so honored to be having this conversation with you today, especially because the subject is really important right now, with the state of the way things are right now, and just being able to support kids who are coming out and the parents who are there to be with them.
Yes, and I am excited to have you on, of course, and have this conversation. And I think it's important as well. And one thing that really struck me about your book, now I haven't read the whole thing. I'm about 3 or 4 chapters, 4 chapters in. And I want to reference something that I read because I thought this really stood out to me. And it won't be verbatim, but somebody had written a little review. And excuse me, many parents and teens find themselves not knowing where to turn. Out is like sitting down with a trusted friend. This is the go-to resource for any parent supporting their LGBTQ kid through the coming out process. To me, that was very poignant and just so on the mark.
Well, I know for me in creating this book, I have been working with families when their kids are coming out for years now. And so much of this book is addressing those questions that have shown up in my therapy room, working with families over the years. And this book, I think I want it to be the kind of thing, the voice of it is, it's 2 a.m, you're panicked about how to support your kid, and you read it over to the nightstand, you pull open the book, and I sit down and we have a nice warm cup of tea, and we're like, look, yes, your fear is real, and it's coursing through your body. And here's the way you can address that. And here's where the fear might be coming from. So it's really about trying to create a very supportive experience for parents. So it's not fear-based, it's more support-based, kindness-based, and just to have like me there with you as you travel through this process.
And I really felt that when I started to read your book, and you really approach it from a very knowledgeable standpoint, but also from really I want to say a faith-based type of point where one could have faith knowing that if they are met with this situation, there's a way to sit with a trusted friend and have the tools, have some knowledge, and know that you are not alone. And I think that really speaks volumes.
Mhm. Well, that's the thing is most parents, I mean, you have a child, you create this lifelong contract to keep them safe, to love them, to care for them. And sometimes in life, we hit speed bumps where, as a parent, you're not quite sure how to do it. And so having a guide to become informed can help a parent to connect that heart, that compassion to knowledge, and then they can be there for their kids.
And I think the informed part is essential, not only as the parent going through the process, but also the child, the kid, the teen going through the process.
Well, I think it's fascinating because for most parents, when their kid comes out to them, it's a little bit of surprise. Even if they suspected their kid might be LGBTQIA plus, when it actually happens, it's a little bit of a surprise. I also tell parents though, your kid has probably been processing this concept of themselves, their sexual orientation or their gender identity for quite a while. And I hate to tell parents this, but you are probably one of the people a little bit lower on the list that they come out to. Often it will be a really good friend, it'll be maybe a trusted teacher. And then when they come to you, they have put a lot of energy into understanding this part of who they are. And so you need to be willing to be vulnerable, to meet them in that space, and to love them for exactly who they are.
And as you were saying that, I can just imagine the child that, as you mentioned, the parent typically maybe the second or third person to know, and they go to somebody that they trust, whether it's a friend or a school counselor, and then to sit down with their parent, there must be so much, I don't want to say fear, and perhaps that is not the correct word, but maybe there's a little fear with some trepidation on how their parent may react. What are they going to think of me now? Are they still going to love me? That's a lot for any young adult to take on.
It's a lot for any person to take on. And you're right, even in the most affirming households, like really cool parents who like are obviously and overtly supportive of the LGBTQIA plus community, kids are even anxious to come out there. And we're not just talking a little bit of like you use trepidation. Oh, it's bigger than that for every kid. Their heart's beating hard, they're sweating, they're anxious, their body temperature is up because in that moment they are facing a a bridge that once they cross that bridge, there's no going back. And they want to make sure that you as a parent are going to be there on the other side of the bridge to meet them with open arms. I talk about this in the book. If you go online and search coming out videos, you'll find that a lot of kids these days record these moments. And the ones that are the most affirming and most beautiful are when the parent simply opens their arms and hugs their kids and says, I love you. And at its most base, that's what you as a parent need to do in that moment. You may have lots of things going on in your brain up there, but it's so important that you open up your heart, you hold your kid close, help them manage that anxiety, help that heartbeat to come down a little, breathe together, remind them that you love them for exactly who they are. And as a parent, if you take that step in that moment, you have set an amazing foundation for this journey of coming out together. And with that foundation in place, lots of other stuff will fall into line.
And as you mentioned, the physical aspect of it, there's also the emotional aspect, the physiological aspect. There's so many moving parts to that moment.
Yeah. And I think it's so vital for a parent to realize that they are having a reaction. Their anxiety may go up. Lots of feelings about, oh, wow, this is new information. I don't know if I'm ready to, how I support this. I don't know what to think about it. Oh my God, is my kid going to be safe? There's a lot of layers that are coming up for parents as well. And one of the things I talk about in the book, in fact, I dedicate a whole chapter to it, is what we call the parent's grieving process. And people hear that and they're kind of like, I don't understand. And so let me just explain a little bit. When a child is born, most parents pick that child up, they look down into its eyes, and they project forward an entire lifetime for their kid. You know, they're going to go through school and they're going to join the soccer team and become the head cheerleader and become valedictorian and then go away to college or trade school and follow in the family footsteps and have children and buy a dog and move in next door. Parents project all of this forward. And when their kid comes out to them, that dream shatters. And so we talk about grieving. What we're grieving is this projected dream that parents had created. And it's so important to give a parent space and time to grieve that vision, to grieve that sensation. And I point this out to the kids that I work with as well too, because I always say, like we talked about earlier, kids, you've been thinking about this for a while. You've done a lot of processing. Your parents have not. We need to give them a little bit of space to move through their emotional process to catch up with us. And when we can create that space for parents to realize that's happening, to let them grieve, to let them now open up and meet the beautiful and amazing kid who is standing in front of them, it's another place of growth that everyone can move through. If we try and skip that process, I think it gets in a way because there's lots of unexplored feelings that parents may be having.
the unexplored feelings. And, it all goes back to what you should say, how you should say it, and how one might react, and the other party maybe a reaction. In fact, you in your book, you also talk about the words you need, more words you need, and I thought that that was priceless.
Yeah, I think it's important for parents to understand there are lots of words that float out in our community. You hear LGBTQ, you LGBTQIA plus, you hear lesbian, you transgender, non-binary, asexual. And as a parent, you may hear these words and not have a deeper understanding of what they mean and what they mean to your kid. So by starting the book off with some of these really just beautiful definitions, it creates vocabulary that you and your kid can use to speak to each other. The one caveat I put in there, and I'm a professional, I work with this population all the time. I'm an openly queer therapist myself, and the words do change rapidly because we're growing. We're creating more nuance in what these definitions mean. So what I'm going to offer you in the book is a place to start from. But the way that I think this can work fantastically, let's say your kid comes out to you as non-binary, and you're like, I read in the book what non-binary was. Got it. But rather than assuming, ask an open-ended question. How does being non-binary show up in your world? Let your kid help you to nuance that definition. Help them to create more space around it so it's not just John said in his book that is this, this, and this. Or I went on to, the Human Rights Campaign website and looked at their glossary of terms, and these are the two sentences that describe non-binary. That's not
Mhm,
doing a service to your kid. What we want to do is understand what non-binary means in all aspects of their life. So
mhm.
that way you can be more supportive of their experience.
So you're creating that connection, but in a different type of way, to let them educate almost the parent on exactly what you said about, what does that mean for you? And
Mhm.
versus, oh, this is what I read about it, and this is what you should do, blah, blah, blah. It's more of a cohesive type, and also to keep that conversation going, which is what the parent should do.
Well, and remember, no matter how cool you want to be as a parent, you're like, oh, I know what non-binary means. Your kid's just like, oh my God, that's so old fashioned. Where do you find that definition? Kids will not give you a break on that stuff. But inside, the idea that you actually have done the work to try and find out what those terms mean and how they apply to the world around you, your kids are going to note that. They're going to say like, oh, my parent is making an effort to meet me as who I am. They're making an effort to understand who I am. And you earn big bonus points. Your kid will never let you know that you earned them, but you're earning big bonus points by doing that extra effort of educating yourself.
Okay, so let me ask you this. You mentioned that the terms or their definitions change from time to time. From when you knew that you were queer to where the definitions are today, what would you say, in your opinion, is something that you learned from that really hasn't changed, or it's changed to be even better to really keep that conversation going?
Mhm. Well, it's interesting because when I initially came out to my parents, I came out as gay. And what that usually codifies for most people is an understanding, oh, you're a man who's attracted to other men. What that definition does not do for me is who I am as a person working through the world. It's not inclusive of all I am as a gay person. And when we look at the word queer, it was used for a long time as derogatory towards the community. And what we're doing now by taking back this word queer is we're saying it no longer has power to hurt me. And for me, queer includes the understanding of me as an activist and an educator and an advocate for the community. So it is a more encompassing and fuller definition of who I am as a person moving through the world. My husband, on the other hand, gay is the description that works best for him as he moves through the world. And that's what's so beautiful about this expansion of this vocabulary is that we can find those beautiful little nuggets that help us to move through space more efficiently and be able to let the world know who we are.
Wow. And of course, as your life evolved and you went through the education and you work with an organization, and you're also work with teens in this realm. What has been a memory that just sticks out to you? For instance, when a teen has come to you and perhaps they are fearful, and then they have this conversation with their parents, and then they come back to you and they're like, oh, what maybe wasn't as hard as they thought, or maybe it's still a bit of a struggle.
Mhm. So I have two stories that come up. One that's really fun and playful. I'll tell that second so we can all have a good laugh together. The first one was more serious, but really beautiful to watch it unfold. I work with some organizations where we actually do like presentations and work with kids to have a space to talk about who they are more openly. And during the course of one of these, let's call it a retreat, we had a kid who attended who was very there, attended all of the workshops and the process groups, but did not say anything the entire day. Was very quiet during lunch break, like had their lunch on their own. And we were all kind of concerned and worried that this kid was getting overwhelmed. At the end of the day, we have what we call a closing circle. And it's a place where everyone can just speak freely about their experience of the workshop. And this kid raised their hands and we were all like, oh, they're going to speak. And what they shared was, it was really hard for me to come here today because I have not come out to anyone. But what I love today is having a space where I could just sit and listen and learn from all of you who have taken this journey ahead of me. And of course, the whole room's now in tears because by simply being present for this kid and being authentically who we were and sharing our story and our knowledge, we were giving them the stepping stones to now step into the world and maybe come out when they were ready. So that's the one that just, every time I tell it, it just makes me tear up because it was such a powerful moment.
Mm.
And for anyone who's listening, it also really expands on that idea of the gift of silence can be incredibly valuable. The one that's a little more playful and fun, I had a kid that I was working with for a while, and I've had this happen with more than one family. Um, and as they were coming out, they're becoming more affirmed in who they were. They started, wearing, pride-based. I think, let's see, they had a pride ring, they had a headband, they had a T-shirt, they had a necklace. Like they were going all out and showing the world who they were. And it was coming up onto a time that there was going to be one of the Pride festivals. June is Pride Month, and there's going to be one of the Pride festivals, and they really, really wanted to go with it. And mom was involved in this conversation and was just concerned that the kid might be too young to go on their own. And after a little processing, mom said, I will take you to Pride. And we're all like, this is so exciting. And everyone geared up for it. And mom, they went to parade together. They walked through the fair and had a great time. But I was talking to mom later and she confessed to me, it's like, I never knew there were so many hot men in the world. So she had her own little bit of eye candy during a Pride festival, but it was a really beautiful experience to watch them bond over this. And then for her to be so open and supportive of this kid's experience.
Wow, that is a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I can just kind of picture that in my head. And yes, I'm sure there were a lot of lots of eye candy. I love that term, by the way. And part of your book, you talk about terms and concepts. And I really loved this part because it really, as you mentioned, as we were chatting about terms before, what I perceived about some of the terms and concepts, I'm like, oh, it made me think more about the value of knowing that, because I think we're presented a lot of times with so much information and it can be very confusing for anybody, really. When you sat down to write this book and you're writing about these terms and concepts. Is there one of them for you that a lot of people, how do I ask this? A lot of people just don't get, for instance, or maybe they're kind of missing the mark?
Mhm. I think the biggest piece of misunderstanding that a lot of people have is the journey of trans and non-binary kids. And we start with talking about gender and gender identity. And these are really important things to understand as a concept, not just as a parent, but also as a society. Um, Oftentimes what happens is when kids are born, and we're going to go with the really old fashioned model here, the doctor holds them up, slaps them on their bottom and announces it's a boy, it's a girl, based on seeing external genitalia. And that's how these ways of us being raised are brought into the world. And very, very quickly, very binary, very black and white. This is a girl, this is a boy. Energy starts surrounding the kids because that's what parents present to them. Let me show you a real quick example of it. What color do boys wear? Janice?
Well, that could be black or blue.
So blue is often boys are blue and girls are pink.
Right.
Okay. What's a thing little boys are told? Don't cry, man up, all of these things that are very, very gendered from a very young age. If you go to a toy store, there are boys' toy aisles and girls' toy aisles. And what's that about? Well, once again, it's a very binary look at gender and experience. And what we understand, is that gender is actually a really beautiful, like full spectrum concept. The way I like to describe gender is, when you're like working on a Word document and you want to change the color or something. So you choose it, you go into the color thing, and then it says more colors. And then that beautiful wheel comes up with all those colors in it. Take that wheel and then spin it. We now look at gender as a very multidimensional process. An idea that these ideas of what is masculine and what are feminine are based on old concepts. And we need to be willing to open ourselves up to look at those values and ask ourselves questions as parents as to where did we get stuck? Where are places that we still believe in this black and white thinking? And by opening up the process of understanding gender at these deeper core levels, that's a place where all of us can take a step forward.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And, obviously, of course, there's been a lot in the news lately, as we all know, and whether somebody agrees or doesn't agree with that concept, I think if there's always an open discussion and, to not cancel something out or not include something. So thank you so much for sharing that. I do appreciate that. When you sat down to write this book, I always love asking this question. And, depending on how long it took you to write it, and now you're finally done with your book. And it goes to the editor, but then it comes back to you. And then it's published. What did that feel like for you?
It's a beautiful culmination of so much of the work of my lifetime to actually watch it be in print. And a really good colleague of mine, Tina Bryson, who is a big player in neurobiology and kids, she threw a launch party at her center. And to look out in the room and to see, I had people in the audience who I had gone to elementary school with, to see colleagues there, to see parents from the community who wanted to learn more about supporting their kids, to see my husband there. It was this beautiful moment of watching all these pieces of my life come together in a really powerful recognition of the journey that I've had. And that book represents this in so many ways. And it has really been this pause, this retrospect, this look back, and also looking forward to how this work can help change the world, hopefully.
And John, it has. It truly has, without a doubt. Wow. My gosh, this has been, I could talk for like another hour. Quite Where do you think your book is going? In other words, this just came out, I want to say it was about 2 months ago, correct?
Yeah, it's just been out a few months. Yeah.
where do you see this book going to? In other words, because something just popped into my head. There's a whole lot of popping going on, by the way. I see you on a TEDx stage.
Mhm.
Where do you see your book going? Where do you see you going?
So I see this book going on to the nightstand of every parent all around the world, whether you have an LGBTQIA plus kid or not, because I think there's so much value in all parents understanding how to create a home environment where you can be supportive of the LGBTQ journey. I think it's that important. There's so much hate speech and fear mongering out in the world right now about who I am as a queer man, of who we are as an LGBTQIA plus community. And for me, this book can be an answer to that fear, a place to meet me, to create understanding, and also to fall in love with the whole journey of who we are as queer people, which I think is really, really important. It's also been an amazing journey too. I have been out in the speaking world for years now. A lot of it messaging about this. I work with schools and do training to create more affirming school environments. I work with corporations. I work with treatment centers. I speak at colleges and do a lot of conversations such as the one we're having today. And I want this to continue growing because if one single person who's listening today can now be more supportive of either their kid or a kid in their community's journey of coming out, then that's the whole purpose behind this.
Oh my gosh, it certainly has. And wherever it decides to go and evolve, it's going to be even that much better. Oh my gosh, I can't thank you enough for being here today. Before we sign off, John, where can our viewers and listeners connect with you further?
So they can take a look at my website, which is www.johnsovec.com, JOHNSOVEC.com. They can also find me on social media on Insta, John Sovec Therapy, on Twitter at John Sovec. And you can find the book online at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and go into your local bookstore too. I'm a big believer in supporting local bookstores, people. We got to keep them alive. They're amazing places to hang out. And if they don't have it in stock, ask them to stock it. It's a beautiful thing to have it as a local community resource. And the other thing that's really cool too that's happening, it's also showing up at libraries all over the country. I have friends who are sending me pictures of like library tables with my book on it. And it's very exciting to see that happening.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. That is so amazing. And I also want to let people know too, this really is a book you should definitely read. It's well written, just so much good information. And when you do purchase it, please remember to leave a written review. People love seeing that. And of course, it helps elevate the book as well. John, thank you so much for being here today. I hope you definitely will consider coming back.
Oh, absolutely. There's been such a delightful conversation.
Definitely, for sure. Thank you so much. Just a word before we close. Remember, if you have a story to share, it's worth telling. Somebody out there needs to be inspired by your words and your courage. My name is Janice Malillo, the host of Stories That Inspire Us. Today, I was inspired by John. Thank you all so much, and we shall see you again real soon. Bye for now.